Hello, fellow patriots. Welcome back to another episode of Red, Rights, and You, the podcast where we dive deep into the muddy waters of politics and somehow manage to climb out laughing, despite feeling filthy for going there in the first place. Now, I've heard from several subscribers this week, and they all asked if I could help them understand how these surveys, these presidential polls work. So today, we're talking about one of the most discussed, at least every 4 years, yet inaccurate features of American tradition, and that is the presidential poll. You know, those numbers everyone talks about, but nobody really seems to fully understand. So buckle up, because we're going on a wild, bumpy, and sometimes confusing ride. First things first, let's cover some basics. What are they exactly? Well, one thing's for sure, they aren't the fun kind of polls that were made to dance on. But the media has been dancing around them for years, and special interest groups have been making it rain by tossing money at all the participants. So, in a way, it is similar, I guess. Now, for those of you who don't live on Twitter or MSNBC, polls are basically political mood rings. They're surveys conducted by companies who are essentially asking, hey, who are you voting for? And these polls can range from highly sophisticated to, well, about as accurate as your surefire method of picking the Powerball numbers using the fortune cookie you received at last night's Chinese buffet. But how did we get here? Well, polling has been around since the 1820s. Back then, people actually went around asking folks who they were voting for. I mean, can you imagine? No internet, no phones, just some poor guy with a clipboard asking angry farmers if they prefer Andrew Jackson or John Quincy Adams. And most believe these crude early accountings were more accurate. Why? Well, because back then they had no motive other than actually trying to get it right. They were trying to be honest. I know. Crazy, right? Now, fast forward to today, and we have a whole smorgasbord of polling companies. Rasmussen, Reuters, YouGov, Quinnipiac. Sounds like a list of horses running in the Kentucky Derby. Oh, which reminds me, I almost forgot. Gallup. The difference is that there is still some integrity left in horse racing. Now, these companies use a mix of methods like random digit dialing, online panels, and sometimes, I assume, Ouija boards to figure out what the American people are thinking. Generally, a sample of between 1,000 and 1,200 people are polled. The larger the sample, the less the margin of error. Some revisit the same group repeatedly, but most sample a completely different group each time. A little suspicious, really. A different 1,000 people each time, and the numbers are still about the same. They fluctuate very little. Now, they target different demographics: old folks, young folks, city dwellers, rural Americans, and sometimes even people like me who have a really hard time pronouncing Quinnipiac. Seriously, though, say that 3 times fast. Now, let's talk about the big A word in polling: accuracy. Polls usually come with a margin of error, which is determined by how many people are polled. The greater the number sampled, the less the margin of error. Now, margin of error is like saying, well, we're pretty sure, but don't quote us on that. Most polls are around 3 to 5%, which is basically pollster speak for, we might be wrong. So when a poll says that candidate A is leading by 2 points and the margin of error is 4 points, they're basically saying, look, this could go either way, and we're really, really sorry if you bet money on it. Now, you're probably asking, what polls are being used now, and how do the results differ? Well, my fellow thoroughly confused friends, that depends on who you ask, and more importantly, how you ask. Rasmussen might have Trump up by 10 points, while Quinnipiac could have him down by 5. It's like watching two different movies with the same characters, but completely different endings. One's a comedy, the other's a horror flick. And both pollsters are convinced that theirs is much better. So this brings us to the $1 million question. How can these polls show a race this close when the general consensus seems to show Trump dominating? The truth is, polling is like asking Americans, how much do you weigh? We all know you're not getting a straight answer. Some people don't pick up the phone, some just outright lie, and others just want to mess with the pollsters. And then you have to consider the shy voter phenomenon. People who are like, yeah, I'm voting for that guy, but I don't want to admit it out loud because, well, you know, the in-laws are all liberals and we're having Thanksgiving dinner over there this year. So while I'm at it, I really want to toss in my 2 cents on why what seems to be a runaway in favor of Trump is determined to be a toss-up with Harris. And some have her holding a slight advantage. And one that does is Fox News, all within that margin of error. Yeah, Fox News, they have a poll too. And I believe the answer is pretty simple. It's drama and the increased ratings associated with it. No media source is immune to the benefits of increased viewership and those almighty advertising dollars that brings. It's all about the Benjamins. Fox may also rationalize that projecting a tight race will cause their conservative audience to put that hammer down and push harder to win. But I really believe they're setting an extremely dangerous precedent here. For those who may believe that the left has the ability and the motive to manipulate election results, I think creating a false neck-and-neck scenario presents them with the perfect excuse to reverse the results and justify that win by claiming that the polls had both candidates running neck and neck within that margin of error. And by the way, some of the polling methods that are still used are laughable. Believe it or not, some still call landlines. Landlines! Who even has those anymore? They're basically calling your grandma, asking her opinion, and then treating it like gospel. No offense to grandmas out there. We all love grandmas, but we don't think you're the swing voters here. So what's the moral of the story? Well, polls are like penny stocks. They might make you feel something, but you probably shouldn't invest your life savings in them. At the end of the day, the only poll that really matters is the one in November when we all step into that booth hoping and praying for a fair election. And well, you know the drill from there. Meanwhile, just remember, keep your polling numbers in one hand and a healthy dose of skepticism in the other. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Red, Rights, and You. Until next time, stay strong, stay the course, and stay patriotic. God bless you all, and God bless America.